Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sports with Frank podcast Friday edition. As usual, we're gonna dive into the weekend games. We talked about the La Liga already in Wednesday's episode, so go check that out if you want some more information on the Spanish league. Today, we're gonna be focusing on the Bundesliga. Pretty important game coming up on Saturday, and we continue with the prediction and the analysis of the Coppa Italia. We talked about the Juventus Milan game on Wednesday. Today, we're gonna cover the Napoli Inter game. So a lot to unpack. Let's go right into it. This is the Sports with Frank podcast. I'm Francesco. Let's do this. Here we go, another weekend upon us. It's going quite fast. If you think where we were when this football return happened the first time, it's already been a month. And it's gonna get even more interesting with time. But for the new that comes in, it requires analysis. The old is still there to talk about, and of course that's the Bundesliga. And this weekend there is a pretty interesting matchup between Monchengladbach and Bayern Munich. So I'd say we just go right into it, and let's talk about what could be for Monchengladbach the game of the season. Right. So this is a fun matchup in my opinion, and it's gonna probably have a lot of surprises because Mönchengladbach, the Bundesliga is the only chance they have to qualify for the Champions League next year. The main competitor is Bayer Leverkusen, and Leverkusen also has the Europa League going for them. So by winning that trophy, they could still qualify for the Champions League even without getting a place through the Bundesliga. This doesn't apply to Mönchengladbach. This is a team that it's been up there for several years now. As I said a few episodes ago, they also managed to qualify for the Champions League a few years back. I think the last time they were there was 2016. So that will be a good achievement for them this season. This is a team that found an impressive couple of strikers with Plea and Thuram. And it's been doing quite well since they returned to Bundesliga. But between Mönchengladbach and Leverkusen, it seems like neither of those teams wants to get the final prize, because it seems like they're losing points against opponents that they really should beat all the time. An example is last Friday they played against Freiburg. They lost 1-0, and that could have been a critical game for them, because as it stands right now, both of those teams, Leverkusen and Mönchengladbach, they are tied in the table. Mönchengladbach is ahead of Leverkusen for goal difference, but we all know that's so fluent that it's very hard to base the rest of your race on the goal difference. So the game against Freiburg would have been a good win, because Bayern had to play against Bayern Munich, and we know how it ended. But even a prediction could have been made that that would have been a tough game for Leverkusen. So those 3 points lost against Freiburg are actually gonna, in my opinion, have a pretty big impact on this race to the Champions League, because by now Mönchengladbach could have been 3 points ahead with the goal difference, so theoretically 4 points ahead, and they're not. They're going to this game against Bayern knowing that they have to win, because this is the Bayern side that is gonna be lacking some critical players. It's just the news of today that Thiago Alcantara is gonna have a surgery for a groin injury. He's gonna be sidelined for at least the rest of the season. The more optimistic view is that he's gonna return for the cup final. Bayern Munich and Bayer Leverkusen both qualified over the week for the final of the German Cup. That's going to happen at the end of this Bundesliga run. So Thiago Alcantara will be out. And then, of course, both Müller and Lewandowski were booked last week against Leverkusen, and they're not going to take part in this game. And for Bayern, that's a big loss, not only because of the caliber of the players. So far they've been two of the best players over the course of the season, especially with Müller after Jens Flick came in and replaced Kovac. Müller has been unbelievable, and Lewandowski, doesn't need any introduction. The guy has been doing what he knows what to do best, scoring goals, and he's probably gonna win, the title of top goal scorer in Europe, unless someone like Messi, makes an incredible return. But I think Lewandowski has pretty much secured it. So not having this kind of player is gonna affect the team. And it's going to affect him even more, considering that Bayern really doesn't have many players on the bench that can come in and contribute right away. I mean, the other option that came to replace Müller could have been Thiago Alcantara. It's not going to be playing. It could be Goretzka, but they don't really have much of an alternative in that middle of the pitch. What I can see happening is probably Goretzka being playing at cam and Alaba move from centre back to centre defensive mid, and probably Hernandez coming in to play the centre back role next to Boateng. But their main issue will definitely be up top because they don't really have a player that can come in and replace Lewandowski. Not just in terms of talent, but really, a player that's ready to go. They have the majority of the bench pieces by now. They are members of their youth team. So overall, this is gonna be trouble for Bayern Munich. So Mönchengladbach has a very, very strong chance of getting in this game and manage to come out with 3 points. Now, Mönchengladbach won't have Plea either. He was ejected in that game against Freiburg, but they're still going to have the majority of the rest of the players. And Plea probably going to be replaced by Rafael. Rafael is a Brazilian striker that's been in Mönchengladbach for years. And, it's a player of experience that is probably not at the same level that he used to be before. And he's not going to be at the same level as Plea, but I think he's going to give them a good enough chance up top. And very much, last week I talked about how the game between Bayer Leverkusen and Bayern Munich was going to be critical for Kai Havertz, because I thought that was going to be the game where he could, come in and really shine on the big stage. That didn't happen because Havertz got a small injury before the game. It's in doubt if he's going to be playing this weekend, but it shouldn't be anything serious. With the transfer window getting closer and the rumors increasing, I don't even know if this could be considered an actual injury for Havertz, but I don't want to speculate on anything. I'm sure if he's not playing, it's because he's not fit to play. But nonetheless, this week is a very similar scenario for Marcus Thuram. So this is a game against Bayern Munich that for every team in Germany, every year is the toughest game to play. It doesn't matter if it's Paderborn or Borussia Dortmund. Bayern Munich is such a good team and so much better than every other team at this moment in the German league that for all these other teams, this is the game where they can actually prove that they belong. And for young players like Marcus Thuram, this is the game where he has to prove that he can be as good as he's been the rest of the season, even against this kind of competition. Now, Bayern, as I said, are not going to have two main players in that team. Three if we consider Thiago to be a starter. So it's going to be a weak at Bayern Munich. So I think Marcus Thuram has a lot of chances here to show that he belongs in this kind of level, because this is the first season really for him as an impactful player. While with Kai Havertz, it's been a few seasons that he's been on the first team. Last year it was already, it came to fame last year really. This year is more of a proven year. He's been extremely good. So I think he proved what he had to prove. But for Marcus Thuram, we still don't know really, because this could be a random season that we've seen plenty of people having before, where a player just clicks in the given season and they manage to come out as potential top players, but then they never pan out to be. So we'll see. But I think this is a first step for him to prove to other teams that maybe are higher up compared to Borussia Monchengladbach that he is actually a guy that can be, a future star. I think, for example, a team like Borussia Dortmund could be very interested in him, especially if Sancho ends up going somewhere else. I heard voices about Manchester United. We'll see. I think in this moment in football, the money it's not as much as it used to be. So either the prices get reduced, but I don't think even a team like Manchester United, regardless of where they have been lately with struggling in the Premier League and not being able to go to the Champions League, this is a rich team and they could make the move. But I think overall the prices will have to be reduced even for teams like them. So I don't know if Sancho will leave, but for Marcus Thuram could be an option to replace him, because he showed that he's probably best suited to be a striker, but he also has the skills that are required to be a winger, especially in the Borussia Dortmund scheme, where you had Hakimi. He's going to be gone next year, but he's probably going to be replaced by another incredible young player that they seem to find everywhere, and then Guerrero on the other side. So the wingers really don't require to have the same defensive skills or the same tendency to come back and recover the ball like other schemes require. In the Borussia Dortmund scheme, the two wingers are really more of center forwards. So I think Marcus Thuram would actually fit very well there. And if he plays well tomorrow against Bayern Munich, that could be a further proof to a team like Borussia Dortmund that he could be, a piece for their future. Because I think price-wise is probably gonna, be valued around the 20 million mark, 25. So it's a player that money-wise is not gonna take much to get, and I think he has high upsides, but it needs to be tested on bigger stages. So important game for Thuram, an important game for Borussia Monchengladbach. As I said, this is their chance. Winning this game boosts their confidence a lot going into this last stretch of Bundesliga game. Just to remind you, there is only 4 games left. So winning tomorrow would actually, be an incredible good result, because then they're going to play against Wolfsburg next week. Then they have Paderborn that probably by the time they play, they're already going to be relegated. And their last game is against Hertha, that probably by the time they play this game, their fate is going to be decided already. Hertha is still in the run for a spot in Europa League. However, they are 5 points behind Hoffenheim with 4 games left. Probably by the time, as I said, that this Borussia Monchengladbach Hertha games is played, Hertha's probably going to be out of any race. So this is really the last big game that Mönchengladbach has. If they make it through this with 3 points, I think they're on good track to get to a Champions League spot eventually. And then Bayern, we talked about this team before. They have nothing else to ask, from this Bundesliga season. They have 7 points over Borussia Dortmund. I doubt they're gonna lose 7 points at any point. This game is probably the only chance left they have to lose, really, because not having Müller, not having Lewandowski, having to reinvent the team, a thing that really Hans Flick hasn't done. So far he has always used the same exact team every game, apart from a few changes. There was a game where Boateng was benched for Hernandez, but that was about it. So we'll see how well he can actually face this situation. So I wouldn't be surprised if Borussia came out with a win, and I'm actually pretty confident that they will. Bayern, they've done what they had to do. They're in the final for the cup, and they're just going to have to now start preparing to be at their top level when the Champions League returns. On Wednesday, we're going to get a lot of information about that, because there is a meeting with, within the UEFA ranks. So we'll talk about it for sure, and we were expecting to get news. The latest rumors are that the Champions League from the quarterfinals onwards are going to be played in Lisbon, with a very similar with a schedule that's going to be very similar to the NCAA basketball tournament, the March Madness, where every game is going to be a single game elimination. So there's no more first and second leg. All of them are going to be played in Lisbon. So I think Bayern has a chance there. If they manage to get with this kind of form that they have right now in 2 months' time, I think they have a big chance to win. But I think from now on, they're going to be focusing on working around their form and be ready for these games in August. I don't think they have much more to ask from this season in the Bundesliga. Now let's get down to the Coppa Italia. We talked about Juventus against Milan on Wednesday. I talked about the fact that we really don't know what we're getting. Very similar to every other league, really, but in this specific situation, we're starting off Italian football with 2 games that are going to be critical to get access to a final right away. There's no time to get to form. You need to be prepared 100% for this game, and I don't think that's physically possible for any team. So it's very hard for me even to make predictions. I talked about Juve being a much better team, but you never know what can happen. Regularly, like even in a regular football game before this, all this COVID-19 pandemic, it was already tough to, in certain games, you have a winner that you wouldn't believe, right? Because if football was only based on technical value, then it wouldn't be as fun to watch it as it is. So if it was unpredictable before, just imagine now. But this other game that we're going to talk about today, the Napoli-Inter game, I think it's actually better to understand and to predict compared to the Juventus game. And here is why. First of all, Inter is a team, like every other Antonio Conte's team, that they have this tendency of being, always going hard, but they have, within games, they have these stretches of about 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes, when they go 120%. and they actually dominate on every level. Conte has shown in all his various teams, with Juventus, then with the Italian national team, with Chelsea, and now at Inter, that he can really take players that are undervalued and make them overperform, overachieve. An example of this, that was quite clear when he had that Italian team at Euro 2016. Really, a team that right now, if you play that team against the current Italian team, the current team would probably beat them 4-5-0, and he managed to almost take them to a semi-final, getting a penalty kick away from going to the Euro semi-final. And the same goes for the first Juventus that he had, where he had really a cast of players that weren't really known, or talent-wise, there wasn't much there at the beginning of the season. A player like Vidal, when he came over, he wasn't considered to be a top player, but Conte used him and kind of transformed it into what he ended up being later on with Juve, and then with Bayern Munich, and now at Barcelona. And he's doing the same here in Inter. A player like Brozovic that has been solid for Inter for several years now in that playmaker role. But with Conte, I think he stepped up, and he's actually, in my opinion right now, I would say that he's up there with Pjanic as the best playmaker in Serie A. And that's Conte's work there, really, because with that 3-5-2 formation that he has, that playmaker role is quite critical. And I think the fact that he was trusted with that by the coach gave Brozovic the extra boost in confidence that actually makes him today an extremely valuable player for any team, I think. And there are others as well. Lukaku has always been a good player. Like, if you look at his numbers, he's always done amazingly. But he was a player that was very raw even at his time as Manchester United. But now he formed that striker duo with Lautaro Martinez that's honestly, impressive. I think, in big games they kind of disappeared, but especially because Lautaro Martinez is so young, I don't think that's unusual. However, with Conte, they're the perfect striker couple to play together, because one is physical and takes the man away, the other one, comes forward to get the ball. And, I think Lukaku has benefited a lot by the presence of Lautaro Martinez there and by Conte's style of play. So Inter is a team that I don't think is hard to predict how well they'll do. I talked about this before. I think even in the Serie A race, Inter are going to be the main antagonist for Juventus. I don't think Lazio has the manpower to stay there and stay attached to the first position with so many games in such a short amount of time. And Inter, I think, will shine much more than Lazio, and I think it's going to compete with Juventus until the last game of the season. And going to this game is a very similar thing. Inter starts, from a 1-0 loss that they suffered in Milan. So, especially in a two-leg game, that's a pretty bad result, because, you had that away goal from Napoli, so they can actually go and play for the draw, or, Inter are going to have to get exposed. They're going to have to get out right away. But as I said, those kind of teams, Conte teams, they have these 30 minutes, 25 minutes of incredible, form. I don't know how they pull it off, but every game there's like a half an hour that you don't understand how they can, be so athletic and put everything in there. And I think if they come out, with this attitude, they're going to be able to score very soon. And I think even physically, I'm pretty sure Inter are going to be the best team out of the gates. I don't think eventually they will be, but I think Conte is the kind of maniac that really puts the team under pressure. I can see him calling every player during this break, like, are you running the treadmill? Are you doing the bicycle? You know what I mean? Like, he's been on them every day during the break. So, in my opinion, Inter's a favorite. On the other hand, though, you have Napoli. Now, we all know what happened to Gennaro Gattuso. His sister died a few days ago, and of course, tragic event. And that's one of those things that, in football especially, we've seen a lot of players when they had tragedy like those in their family, that they came out, during the game and they were incredible. An example that comes to mind is Del Piero. When his dad died, he scored that amazing goal in Bari. I think it was the year 2000. And I can see the Napoli team, coming out after this break with a mission in mind of getting Gattuso that trophy, I don't want to say to give him something to cheer for, because we all know that after an event like this, it's very hard to focus on anything else, because anything else seems meaningless. But I think the team wants to give as much as they can to the coach, and for them, it's giving him a cup. Now, that's definitely going to be a factor, and I think that's going to be something that going to play a big part in this matchup. But also, I don't want to take anything away from Napoli. Napoli is a good team, and Gattuso, I can't stress this enough. I still can't understand why AC Milan sacked him when they did. Because this is a guy, he may not have like the flashy football that Guardiola has, or the incredible communication skills that belong to Mourinho, but he is such a solid coach. A few years ago, he almost took AC Milan with a team of, honestly, an awful team, still better than one they have today, but still nowhere close to be a Champions League team. He almost took them to the Champions League. Last time Milan qualified for the Champions League was 2012 with Max Allegri, and since then it's been tragic, and they haven't managed to get back to their European status. And with Gattuso, they were almost there, and they decided to sack them at the end of the season because there was some misunderstanding with the with the owners and the people in charge of buying players, etc. And that was, in my opinion, a mistake. And it's clear to me by watching Napoli that it was even more of a mistake, because now Gattuso is coaching a team that's competing with AC Milan, for that Champions League spot. Napoli, last year they came second. This year they struggled, especially at the beginning of the season with Ancelotti. But even then, it was more of a big, a situation there between Ancelotti and De Laurentiis, who's the owner of this team. De Laurentiis is the kind of owner that always wants to be the main star in his team, and he doesn't tolerate someone like Ancelotti that has, of course, a huge presence as a legend of the game after winning all these Champions Leagues and all these championships all over the world. So after a year there, it didn't work out, and that reflected on the team. They didn't really start well. There was a point when Ancelotti was sacked that the team was closer to the relegation zone than they were to a Champions League spot. But now we get Tuesday, they are doing much better. And after a few games, of getting used to the new coach, Napoli have been, in my opinion, a surprise. I didn't expect them to be good at any point, because I based myself on the first part of the season and there wasn't really much to hope for there. But they have been very, very, very good and very well coached. They did incredibly well in the Champions League against Barcelona. In my opinion, they should have won that game, end up being a draw, but there's everything to play for in the return leg. And even in the Serie A, they've done great. They lost their last game. It was a 2-0 defeat against Fiorentina in January, but then after that they managed to get through the semifinals against Lazio, the team that is currently the champion for the Coppa Italia. They beat Juventus, they beat Sampdoria, they had that stumble against Lecce, and then they beat Inter. So they're doing very well in this 2020. And I think it's a team with a lot of values. They have some very nice players like Di Lorenzo, right back, that I like a lot. They have Koulibaly. Maroulas is not going to be part of this game. He's injured. I don't really know when he's coming back, but that's a big loss for them. But with Koulibaly there, the partner in the center back position doesn't really matter that much. All the players they have are pretty viable. So I think if any player has to be missing there, it would have been worse if it were Koulibaly missing and Maroulas playing. But then, of course, in midfield they have Fabian Ruiz. That if I had to pick a player from Napoli that I would like to see at Juventus, I would pick Fabian Ruiz, because I believe is a very good player, and I can see him becoming very, very good and moving away from Napoli at some point. There were talks about Real Madrid. I don't know if that's the right place for him, but I could see him going to England. And then, of course, there are three strikers with Insigne, the captain, Mertens, that just renewed his contract. It seemed like he was very, very close to Inter, but eventually he decided to stay in Napoli. He is a guy that has come there. It's been 7 years now that Mertens has played in Napoli, and is becoming, very Italian as a player. He's very attached to the city, so I'm not surprised he decided to stay. And then Callejon, another guy that's actually coming to the end of his contract. He came over the same season as Mertens did. With him, there is more of a chance of him leaving, but we'll see. So far, they've been very, very good. And then of course they have Milik on the bench that I really like. I think he's an underrated striker. He's still very young, and as a bench piece, I think it's a pretty good one. And actually, the benches could be a factor in this game because I believe that Napoli has a better bench than Inter does. Napoli have on the bench players like Alan, which until a few seasons ago, but even last season, he was considered one of the best midfielders in Serie A. Milik, and Politano, a guy that used to play for Inter until January, so definitely has some revenge in mind. So overall, a very very good team. That, as I said, they definitely have what it takes to take home this result. So they will definitely play a game that will live up to the expectations, and I think it's going to be an interesting game. But as I said, I think Inter has the edge, even if they're starting from a 1-0 defeat. I think for the way Conte has been preparing this team and the way the Conte's team play, especially when it's the start of the season. Like, remember, this is basically the start of another season. So if you go back and look at Conte's team at the beginning of every season, they're always at their top. They have some some moments of weakness later on, February, March, but the beginning, the first 2-3 months, they're always super good, and this is no different. So I think Napoli will put up a fight. As I said, the Gattuso situation is going to give the Napoli team an extra boost, and I think they have the right players to to be a threat for Inter. But I think eventually Inter will make it through. So I'm predicting it now. I'm probably gonna be wrong, but I believe that the Coppa Italia final will be played between Juventus and Inter, and that's gonna be a hell of a game because this season Juve beat Inter twice. In Milan was a 2-1 win. In Turin was a 2-0 win for Juventus. That was the first game the Juventus played behind closed doors right before the break, and Juve have dominated both of these games. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm biased, but if you go back and watch the games, Inter really didn't do much in the first one, and in the second one, not at all. I don't think there was any point watching the game that I thought that we were going to lose, and if anything, I think we should have won with a larger margin. I remember CR7 almost had like another couple of goals. One was stopped by the post, another one by the keeper. But it's gonna be it will be an interesting final because I'm sure Conte wants to win against Juventus. We all know what it means to a Juventus fan base, what he was as a player, what he was as a coach. Because let's not forget that he was the guy that really took Juventus back to a Serie A title and back to being a juggernaut in the Serie A. And of course, him going to Inter was a big blow for every Juventus supporter. And I know he wants to win. Knowing the guy, I know he wants to win every game, and this one especially. So there will be an interesting final just to see what he does to prevent his team to play the same that they played in these other two games this season so far. And for Sarri, that will be his first trophy, and winning a trophy against Inter is definitely sweeter than any other thing. So I think that will be the final, and I think that will be actually the best final to promote Italian football abroad before the start of the Serie A again in about a week time. So there it is, another episode coming to an end. Last one for this week. I opened a Telegram channel. For those of you who don't know what Telegram is, it's a social media very similar to a WhatsApp where you can create groups and share your opinions. And this group I created is for podcast listeners. There is a link on my Twitter. You can go and check that out at Sports with Frank. Also follow me on Instagram at sports_with Frank. And join the group because we're going to talk about these games live tonight, starting at 8 p.m. UK time, tomorrow as well. And then anything football really. We talk about jerseys, we talk about, anything going on, transfer market, everything. So just come and join and have a good time. For the podcast, we'll be back on Monday, where, of course, the Premier League is returning next week, so we start previewing that. And talking about the Telegram group, I had a poll going out there, and the people decided that the team they wanted me to talk about in depth on Monday was going to be Chelsea. So we'll talk about them, especially with all this transfer news going around. Everything, it seems to be the hottest team in football at the moment, so definitely a good one to talk about. And then we'll preview the week with the first games coming on Wednesday. And of course, we'll review what happened during the weekend with the Coppa Italia, looking ahead for the finals. That's also on Wednesday the 17th. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe on Spotify and leave a review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. A 5-star review will be much appreciated, because the more review we get out, the easier it is for other people to find the podcast. So, if you want the community to grow, just put a 5-star down and leave a comment, and people will be able to see the podcast easily. That's it for today. I'll see you again on Monday. This was the Sports with Frank podcast. I've been Francesco. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.